favorite Michael Jordan basketball story came from the game when the scorer 70 points in a championship game. The Chicago Bulls lead was so big that in the final minute, Coach Phil Jackson put a player by the name of Stacey King, a seldom-used rookie, in as a substitute. King scored a meaningless free throw. Some years later, he was asked by a reporter, "What was the highlight of your career?" King literally reported, "It would have been the night Michael Jordan and I combined for 71 points." It helps when you're playing with the best. That is precisely, friends, where we stand. Except that anytime we score at all in ministry, we do anything worthwhile in ministry, it is by God's grace, not simply by our skill. In the work of God's kingdom, we are servants who are waiting for the next command, are we not? The ministry belongs to whom? Who does the ministry belong to? Us. The scripture says the ministry belongs to God. As Paul puts it in verse 1, since it is by God's mercy that we are engaged in this ministry. Friends, whatever ministry you have, it's God's mercy that you're in it. We do not lose heart. Why don't you lose heart? Because it's whose ministry? Whose ministry? It's God's ministry. Even on days when it seems in our humanness that we can never possibly make a difference for the kingdom, we can know that God is still having his way in us. If we let him. So, the first thing, jars of clay that we hold is God's ministry. That's one of the treasures. The treasure that has been entrusted to jars of clay is, secondly, God's message. Flawed as you are, flawed as I am, we are called to be reporters of the good news of Jesus Christ to a world who has never heard it. It's hard to watch TV and not feel repulsed when a reporter maneuvers to become bigger than the story itself. Paul says that God's person, God's people, must never go that way. We instinctively flinch when a Christian or a TV evangelist somehow implies that the good news is about them. Do we not? It's not about them. It's not about us. It's about Jesus. Look at verse 5 of this text. What does it say? We do not proclaim ourselves. We proclaim Jesus Christ as Lord, and ourselves as your slaves for Jesus Christ. Obedient messengers never trump message. That's the message. Our task is to share the treasure. And how do you do that? We choose to be servants. We choose to be vessels. We choose to be on a mission. A mission from God. Hear this clip. Kind of funny, but I guess the point. From the Blues Brothers, Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi. Ex-cons and sometimes musicians who are trying to raise money for an orphanage have a pat answer when someone asks what they're doing. And here it is. They always say it as if it was actually true. The very idea that two inept, unworthy human beings could be on a mission at all from God was, of course, the central joke of the whole story. Friends, if you are a follower of Jesus Christ, this is the story of our life. You are on mission from God. And we must never fall into despair about our own weakness that we lose the conviction that God will use us. Though we boast all the glamour of a clay pot, God has entrusted to us, the reporters, the role that is most important. The most important news that has ever been heard, and that is for us to share the message. The message that has been entrusted into these jars of clay. You, friends, are on a mission from God. Are you? Do you recognize that? Do you accept it? Have you accepted that mission? Have you? It's a question you only can answer. Lastly, first of all, we have the treasure is carried in broken containers of human lives, and it's what? God's ministry. Secondly, what is the treasure in broken containers? An us? That's right, the message. And finally, the last thing, the treasure that God has put in the containers of our heart and minds is His power. Paul draws an essential contrast in verse 7 of this text. But we have this treasure in clay pots, so that it may be made clear that this extraordinary power belongs to whom? To God, and does not come from us. That's why God has chosen to use human beings to share the good news, so that He receives glory and not us. Paul, you see, God delights to work with unlikely characters. Moses was the original basket case, somebody said. When he heard the call of God and he said, "Here, my Lord, send me." Except he was a little reluctant at first, of course. Gideon gasped, "You can't choose me. I'm the least of the least of the least in my family tree."